I remember the desert like it was alive that night. The air was thick, almost heavy, carrying the scent of sand and dry sage. My boots crunched against the cracked earth, each step echoing in the vast empty expanse. Fog had begun to rise, though it shouldn't have, rolling, pale, curling around the rocky outcrops and sparse scrub. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped, but it didn't sound normal, almost wrong. I tightened my jacket around me and tried to ignore the static humming in the distance. Like the world itself was vibrating just out of tune. The moon, veiled behind thin clouds, cast flickering shadows that seemed to move independently, twisting like smoke. I'd been on patrol alone, checking the old abandoned mines that locals whispered about, places they said were haunted by creatures too cunning to name. My radio crackled faintly, but no voice came through, only that same low, persistent hum. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Not human, not quite animal. Something crouched low, shifting with the sand, watching me. I froze. The wind carried a faint whisper, almost a laugh, or maybe it was my own heartbeat echoing back. My instincts told me to run, but curiosity rooted me in place. And then I saw it. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glimmered with a pale, unnatural light. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in the desert. I never should have opened the door. The desert was quiet that night. Too quiet for how wide it stretched. Cold wind moved like a breath across the dunes, carrying something faint, like words, half buried in the sand. I thought it was just the wind at first. We all did. The sky was pale with a thin moon, its light spilling over the ridges, soft as frost on stone. Every grain of sand seemed alive, shifting, whispering, as if something beneath the surface wanted to speak. Our boots left clean trails behind us, but the dunes swallowed them almost instantly. Even our voices felt wrong here, muted as though the air itself didn't want to be disturbed. Then we saw them, footprints, not ours. Too long, too narrow, and leading nowhere. They started near a ridge deep in the sand, and then just stopped. No turn. No sign of a body or creature. Just vanished, mid-step, like something had been erased. We stood there for a long time, our flashlights trembling slightly in our hands. The beams caught little curls of sand that twisted and fell back into place. The night hummed around us, a low vibration like electricity under the earth. Someone whispered my name, soft, close to my ear. But when I turned, no one was near me, only the desert. Only the moon, a shape moved at the edge of my vision. Tall, thin, too smooth in its motion. It slid along the ridge, its outline breaking and reforming like smoke caught in a current. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of the heat. But the air was cold, sharp enough to bite the inside of my throat. I blinked, and it was gone. The silence after was heavy, thick enough to feel in my chest. Even the sand seemed to pause, as if waiting for something. One of the men muttered, "We should move." But his voice didn't carry. It just fell flat, swallowed by the wind. The moonlight shifted then, stretching our shadows across the dunes, long, distorted shapes that didn't match our movements. They reached farther than they should have, bending, curling toward the ridge where the footprints had ended. I took a step back. My shadow did not. It lingered like it was tethered to something else entirely. The air turned colder, dry but heavy. Each breath scraped like dust inside my lungs. There was a sound again. Not quite a whisper this time, but a murmur. A crowd hidden just below the sand. Words I couldn't understand, rolling beneath my feet. I wanted to speak, but my mouth felt full of static. Something moved behind the nearest dune. Not walking, gliding. The sand didn't part or rise. It just shifted, as though the thing beneath it was sliding through like water. The whispering grew sharper, closer. It brushed my neck like a voice pressed against skin. I turned my light toward the sound, and the beam caught something. A face. Pale, smooth, its eyes too wide and still. It was watching me, not blinking, not breathing. And then, like smoke caught in wind, it folded away, dissolving into the sand. The whispers stopped. Silence. Even the air froze. The others stood motionless, their faces pale in the moonlight. None of us said a word. There was nothing to say. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, unbroken and bare. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't walking alone anymore. Something had seen us. Something that lived between the dunes, where the wind carries voices that aren't quite wind at all. When I looked back one last time, the footprints were gone. All of them. Ours too. The sand was smooth, untouched, as if we had never been there. The desert breathed once, a soft exhale through the cold air, and fell silent again. That silence has never left me. Even now I can still hear it beneath the hum of my thoughts, like a whisper buried deep in the sand. The night had settled deep over the desert, cold, still. Only the wind moved, soft streaks of air, brushing over my face, carrying the dry scent of dust and stone. We had stopped near a shallow pond, barely more than a puddle, but in the moonlight, it looked alive. The surface was perfectly still, holding the sky like glass. Every star, every cloud, and the pale moon, hanging above it, quiet and full. I crouched beside it. The air was colder here, as if the water drew the heat out of the night. When I looked closer, the reflection of the moon trembled. Not from the wind, not from me. It moved, slowly, deliberately. A small ripple that spread outward in circles, but the water hadn't stirred. No pebble, no insect, no reason. Then the reflection blinked. I froze. The moon above was steady, bright and untouched. But its image below shifted. It slid slightly to the left as if trying to look at me. My breath caught. The air pressed heavy in my throat. The ripples began to change shape, long streaks across the surface, stretching like shadows running through fog. For a moment, they almost looked human. Thin figures, arms swinging, feet barely touching the water, each movement mirrored one another. Like a silent crowd, forever caught mid-run. The longer I stared, the more I felt it. That quiet pull, like the pond was watching me back. Something brushed against my ankle. A faint vibration in the sand. The reflection quivered again, and for the briefest second, I saw my own outline move. Before I did, it tilted its head first, then lifted a hand. I hadn't moved. The water rippled in slow motion, and I realized the reflection wasn't copying me. It was leading. A thin breeze pushed past my ear, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. The figures in the pond began to fade one by one, melting back into the silver surface. Only one shape remained, still. Crouched at the far edge, its outline was sharp, too sharp for water to hold. I leaned closer. The reflection leaned closer, too. Not mirrored, not opposite, just watching. Its eyes were darker than the rest of it. Holes where the moonlight disappeared. For a second I thought it was my shadow. But the moon was behind me. There shouldn't have been one at all. The air thickened, like breathing through ash. Every small sound around me faded. Even the hum of the desert seemed to pull away. I could hear my heartbeat, slow, steady, loud in the quiet. The reflection's head tilted again. Not curious, not angry, just studying me, as though deciding if I still belonged here. The water twitched once more, and the shape's hand, my hand, pressed upward, breaking the surface. But nothing touched me, only ripples. Only the soft hiss of moving sand. I stepped back. The image didn't. It stayed crouched, one hand resting on the glassy surface, the other reaching toward the place where I had been. The moon above shifted through thin clouds, its light flickering over the pond, and when it cleared, the reflection was gone. The water was smooth again, empty. Only the moon remained, perfectly centered, calm, and cold. I waited, listening for something, a whisper, a movement, a sign, but there was nothing. Only the quiet hum of the desert and the soft scrape of wind through sand. When I finally turned to leave, I saw it again, not in the water this time, but in the shimmer of moonlight that followed just behind my footsteps. moving when I didn't, pausing when I breathed. Its shape ran along the pale surface of the sand, as if reflected on air. I didn't look back again, but even as I walked, I could feel it, that faint echo of myself. A few seconds too late, still crouched by the pond, still watching, waiting for me to return. The desert never sleeps. It just waits. We were moving again, cutting across a stretch of pale sand under a washed-out moon. The air was cold enough to sting. Each breath scraped dry against the back of my throat. The others walked in silence, their outlines ghosted by the faint shimmer of heat that still rose from the ground. Our radios hissed softly at our sides, a low hum, steady and harmless, until it wasn't. A burst of static cracked through the channel. Sharp, then faint, then clearer. A voice whispered my name, not loud, not urgent, just a breath, shaped like me. I looked around. No one else had spoken. Their faces were turned toward the dunes, expressionless, half-lit by the pale sky. Then the static shifted again, and the voice came back. Not mine, not anyone I knew. It said my name once more, drawn out, distorted, like it had traveled through sand before reaching me. The others stopped. One of them asked if I'd heard it too. I nodded, but my voice wouldn't come out. The radio clicked again. This time all of our names, spoken slowly one by one, each syllable bending wrong. Like the desert was learning how to speak. The static thinned into silence. Then footsteps, faint but close. They came from behind us, a few paces delayed, crunching softly into the sand. We turned. No one there. When we stopped walking, the steps stopped too. Perfectly timed. The desert air held its breath with us. No wind, no movement. Only the pale hum of the radios and the dry hiss of static fading into quiet. Someone whispered, "Maybe it's an echo." But echoes don't breathe. They don't wait for you to move first. We started walking again, a little faster. The steps returned, always behind, always matching. The rhythm became almost human. Heel, toe, heel, then off-beat. Too many. More than us. The dunes began to change shape as we moved. Their edges softened, like fog clinging to the sand. A faint light flickered ahead, a weak white shimmer just above the horizon. It pulsed once, then again, drawing us closer. No one spoke this time. We just kept walking. The light seemed farther each time we blinked, sometimes brighter, sometimes gone completely. The radios hissed again, like breathing through the wires. When the light steadied, we were already standing where it had been. There was nothing there, only flat sand, and the quiet. The air around us felt heavy, thick enough to press against my skin. My hands were cold, but sweat traced the back of my neck. The moonlight caught something on the surface. Ripples. As if the sand itself was shifting, slowly inhaling. That's when I realized the footsteps hadn't stopped. They'd changed direction. Now they were circling, faint, measured, just beyond the edge of sight. Each crunch of sand felt closer to my pulse. I lifted my flashlight, but the beam broke against the air, like shining through water. Shapes flickered there. Not solid, not smoke, something between both. Every motion made the radio tremble, distorting with whispers we couldn't place. My name again, then someone else's. Then laughter, but stretched thin and wrong. The light blinked once more in the distance, then split into two. Then four, all moving, all pulsing in rhythm with our breathing. I wanted to say we should go back, but the words caught in my throat. Because when I turned toward the others, they were already looking past me, back the way we came, and behind us were lights too, pale, flickering, mirroring us exactly. Each one moved when we did, stopped when we did, reflected us like we were trapped in some invisible glass. I took one slow step forward. The lights took one back. The desert had an echo, not sound, not shadow, something deeper. The radios crackled again, all at once, and through the static came a voice that wasn't human anymore. Just a hum, low and endless, like the earth speaking in reverse. Then silence, pure, unbroken, The air felt lighter again, though no one had moved. The lights were gone. The footsteps, too. Only our own remained, fresh in the sand. Leading forward, and beside them, another set. Identical, same stride. Same weight, but pointing the wrong way, back toward where we had come from. I turned off my radio. The others did the same. The silence didn't end. It just kept breathing. The desert around us shimmered faintly in the moonlight. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement beneath the sand. A slow pulse, almost like veins under skin, alive, watching, and as we walked on, our echoes followed. Quiet, patient, never too close, never too far, like the desert had finally learned our names. The wind had changed. It came colder, sharper, dragging dry sand across the ground like whispers scraping glass. Night stretched wide across the desert, a pale sky washed thin by moonlight, and the silence between dunes that never really felt empty. We walked slower now. The air smelled faintly of stone and dust, like old things waiting just beneath the surface. Somewhere ahead, something rattled, a hollow click. Then another, almost rhythmic. At first I thought it was debris, a rusted can maybe, or loose gear caught in the wind. But the sound kept time with us. Every step, every pause. When we stopped, it stopped. When we moved, it followed. The sand shifted under my boots, soft and cold, and for a moment I swore I felt it move back. Not sink, move, like something breathing just beneath. A faint rustle drifted across the ground, dry and brittle as if the desert itself were rearranging its bones. Then came the clatter, tiny snaps, soft collisions, like pebbles tumbling against one another, except they weren't random. They had rhythm, a steady, almost deliberate pattern, too clean to be wind, too human to be chance. I turned toward the sound. The dunes lay still, smooth under the moon, and then I saw them, scattered fragments across the sand, small, white, bleached from sun and time, bone, ribs maybe. A jaw, something that looked like fingers, thin as twigs, half buried near a ridge. They quivered with each gust, not from wind alone. The movement was too synchronized, a soft rattle pulsing in rhythm with our steps. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, that the air was playing tricks, but the sound began to grow, layered, deeper, as if more things beneath the sand had begun to stir. The others noticed too. Their heads turned in unison, their breath pale against the air. Every sound felt closer now, rattling beneath our feet. Following, I looked to the ridges. Shadows slid between the rocks, flickering fast, like silhouettes moving just out of time with us. Each shape vanished the instant I focused, but I could feel them. Watching, mirroring. The sand trembled faintly under my boots again, a slow vibration that moved like a heartbeat through the ground. Something beneath was pacing us, matching step for step, just out of sight. I whispered to no one, "Do you feel that?" No answer. Only the sound, the dry percussion of things that shouldn't move. The moonlight caught one of the bones. It rolled slightly uphill, against gravity, as if pulled. Then it stopped. The rest stilled too. For a breathless moment, everything froze. Not a single whisper of wind. Not even the hum of our radios. Just the quiet weight of the desert pressing down, listening. Then came the smallest sound. A single crack. Bone splintering. It echoed longer than it should have, bouncing between dunes, stretching thin until it almost sounded like a sigh. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers, in my teeth. Everything inside me wanted to move, but my body stayed still. The sand beneath us twitched again, like a muscle flexing in its sleep. And from somewhere deep below, something rustled, slow, steady, as if crawling up toward the surface. I took a step back. The rattling followed. The wind returned suddenly, howling low and full, and the bones scattered like leaves, spinning into the dark, rolling over the sand in all directions. But the rhythm stayed. Underneath it all, pulsing, constant, alive. I kept walking after that. None of us spoke. None of us looked back. Even the radios stayed silent, as if the air between us had turned too thick for sound. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, its surface smooth, untouched, but every few steps, that faint rustling would return. Behind, beneath, inside the sand, always in rhythm. Always keeping pace, I told myself it was the wind, that it had to be. But the wind doesn't breathe, and it doesn't remember your steps. When the dunes grew still again, I could almost hear the pattern fade, like bones clicking softly together in some slow, patient applause, then silence. Heavy, endless, watching. The desert ended where the rocks began. Black stone, sharp and dry, rising out of the dunes like something that had clawed its way up from beneath. The entrance to the mine waited there, a hollow wound in the hillside. Its wooden frame half rotted, leaning under the weight of silence. We stood at the threshold for a long time. The air coming from inside was cold, with a faint metallic taste that coated the back of my tongue. I thought it smelled like rain on rusted iron. But there hadn't been rain here for months. When our boots crossed the edge of shadow, the air changed. It thickened, carried a low hum, steady and deep, like the earth itself was breathing. The beam from my flashlight shook against the walls. They shimmered faintly, not from moisture, but from something beneath the rock, a dull reflection. Like old glass under the surface, catching bits of light, then swallowing them. We moved single file, each step echoing too long, as if the tunnel repeated our presence back to us. Every few feet the hum shifted tone, not louder, just different. Almost like it was responding. I ran a hand along the wall, cold, smooth in some places, but carved in others, lines running deep like veins through stone. They pulsed faintly under my fingertips. The others didn't seem to notice. Their lights swept over the passage, catching glimpses of wood beams, old rails half buried in dust. Something flickered at the edge of my vision, a shape. Thin, pale against the dark, it moved just as I turned. Too fast to see clearly, too smooth to be a trick of light, I called out. No answer, only the hum again, rising, then falling. The tunnel branched into two. Left, where the air felt colder. Right, where something faintly clicked, like metal brushing against stone. We chose left. The air pressed harder now, heavy with the taste of iron and something sour beneath it. My throat felt dry, but every breath came damp, as though the mine exhaled each time we inhaled. We passed a cart, overturned and broken. Its wheels were bent, half melted into the ground. The metal was smooth, too clean for how long it must have sat here. I touched it. It was warm. The hum stopped. All at once. The silence was so thick I could hear the faint pulse in my ears. That's when we heard it. A creak. Slow, long. From deeper inside the mine. A door. But there shouldn't have been one. No structures that deep. Just rock and earth. We followed the sound anyway. Each step softer. Each breath careful. The passage opened into a wide chamber. Ceiling low. Walls lined with old support beams, splintered and blackened with age. At the far end, a wooden door. Heavy, unmarked. It stood slightly open, rocking just enough to let the hinges sigh. The light from my flashlight trembled across it. The surface was scratched, deep grooves cutting into the wood, claw marks, long, uneven, fresh. The edges were dark with something that wasn't quite rust. I stepped closer. The air around the door buzzed faintly, a vibration that reached through my boots, up into my chest. Behind it, something shuffled, slow, dragging, then still. The hum returned. Different this time, higher, uneven, like something struggling to imitate a voice, my hand lifted without meaning to. The wood was cold, but it pulsed faintly, as if something on the other side was breathing through it. The marks ran deeper near the handle. Whatever had made them wanted out, I whispered to the others, but the words felt muffled, as if swallowed by the air itself. We stood there, a few heartbeats of stillness, until the door shifted again, just a little, enough for the light to slip through the crack. There was nothing beyond it, only black, but the darkness looked thicker somehow. Heavy. Wet. The hum stopped again, and in the silence I heard it. A slow scrape against stone, coming closer. Something moved in that blackness. Too faint to see, but real enough to feel. The air turned colder, and with it came a whisper, low and broken. Like static forming words that never finished, I stepped back. So did the others. The door closed on its own, quietly, carefully. The vibration faded from the air, and the mine went still. Only the faint metallic taste remained. Lingering on the tongue, thick and wrong, no one spoke. No one moved. When we finally turned to leave, the hum started again. Soft, almost gentle, like a heartbeat buried deep in stone. As we reached the mouth of the tunnel, I glanced back one last time. The door stood where we left it, closed, calm, but the claw marks were gone. The wood was smooth, untouched, and just before I stepped into the moonlight, I felt it, a breath against the back of my neck, warm, close from inside the mine. The desert was quiet that evening. Too quiet. The sun had slipped behind the dunes, leaving a dim orange haze that stretched like a dying fire across the sand. We'd been walking for hours, the patrol spaced wide, our shadows long and thin, reaching far ahead like they were leading us somewhere. But the air, it wasn't still. There was a vibration in it, low, steady, like the world was holding its breath beneath a hum. At first, I thought it was in my head, a ringing. The kind you get after too much silence, but the others heard it too. Their steps slowed. Their faces tilted to the horizon. It wasn't coming from one direction. It was everywhere. Inside the ground. Inside the bones. The hum pulsed softly, not like a sound, but like a presence. The sand shivered. Just slightly, grains shifting, as though something beneath was stirring. The air smelled dry, with that faint metallic edge that never really left after the mine. Every breath carried dust, and something else, something like static. Our radios had stopped working hours ago. Just a hiss, then silence, so we listened. To that low, endless vibration, spreading across the desert like a heartbeat too far away to reach. One of the others, Malik, pointed ahead. "Do you see that?" he whispered. I followed his gaze. The horizon trembled. It looked alive. The line between sand and sky wavered, rippling like heat. But the air was cold now. A slow wind brushed against my cheek, carrying a smell like burnt stone. The hum deepened. I could feel it against my ribs. Then the shadows began to move. They stretched, longer than they should. Ours and others. They crawled across the dunes, bending in strange directions, shifting even when we stood still. I blinked. But they didn't return to normal. They pulsed with the hum, growing thinner, then wide again, as if breathing. One shadow broke from the rest. It slid along the ridge of a dune and vanished over the edge. No one spoke. We just watched. Then something leapt far out between two dunes, a blur, dark against the fading sky. It moved wrong. Too smooth. Too fast. It crossed the distance in seconds, bounding through the sand without ever touching it. Each leap carried it farther than anything should be able to go. Malik stepped back. I could hear his breath catch, short, uneven. The figure stopped suddenly, perched on the crest of a dune. The last light of dusk caught its outline. Long limbs, a shape that didn't fit any body I knew. Its head tilted, not curiously, but slowly, like it was listening. The hum dropped lower as though responding to it. I could feel the vibration through my boots again. The sand trembled. Softly at first, then harder. The shadow on the ridge moved. It flickered once, then vanished, but the hum stayed. Louder now, filling the air, filling my chest. We turned in a slow circle. The horizon, it wasn't still anymore. Everything beyond the dunes rippled and shook, as if the desert itself were humming. Shapes flickered there, too far to see clearly, but moving, leaping in every direction. For a moment, I thought I could see dozens of them, running parallel to the horizon, gliding just above the sand. Then what? Nothing. The hum cut out. Just like that. The air fell flat, heavy, silent. Even the wind stopped. The world froze around us, each dune sharp and still, each breath too loud in the quiet. Malik whispered my name, but it came out thin, like the air swallowed it halfway. Something brushed past us, a rush of cold wind low to the ground, stirring the sand into a whisper. It circled once, then disappeared into the stillness. The hum didn't return, only the faint hiss of wind as it tried to breathe again. The horizon looked normal now, smooth, calm, but I knew it wasn't. When I blinked, I thought I saw the shadows move again, not out there, but closer, ours, stretching, slowly, pulling toward something just beyond sight. The air felt wrong, charged like before a storm. A quiet pulse trembled through the sand one last time. Barely there, then the horizon flickered, once like a light about to die. We didn't wait after that. We turned back toward camp, walking fast, not running, because running would make it real. Behind us, the wind started again, soft, gentle, almost kind, but beneath it, just barely, was the hum, faint, steady, following. The desert changed overnight. It wasn't the same place anymore when I woke. The dunes were gone, swallowed by a heavy fog that moved like breath across the sand. It clung to everything. The rocks, the tents, even our skin. The air felt damp for the first time in days. It carried a faint smell, cold metal and something faintly sweet, like flowers that had been left to rot. We couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The world had turned gray, colorless. Our patrol lights cut thin lines through the haze, but the beams didn't travel far. They just sank into the fog and vanished. Each step felt slower, heavier. The ground beneath my boots no longer sounded like sand. It was softer, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Someone whispered behind me, a voice too low to make out. When I turned, no one was there, only the fog, curling and folding, as if listening. We stayed close together after that. The silence between us thickened. Our radios crackled once, then fell dead again. All that remained was the faint rustling of gear and the rhythm of our breathing. Then something shifted. Out in the fog, a shape. It moved slow at first, then stilled, like it was watching. The beam of my flashlight trembled across the haze. The figure blurred, then slipped backward, melting into white. Another appeared to the left, then one behind. Everywhere I looked, the fog rippled, as if something was circling just out of reach. Malik muttered a prayer under his breath. I wanted to join him, but my throat had gone dry. The air felt colder now, thin. Each inhale burned, and then the eyes appeared, at first just two, small, distant, a faint glow hovering above the sand. Then more, dozens, some low to the ground, some higher, all unmoving. They didn't blink, didn't flare or fade, just waited. I could feel their attention, a quiet weight pressing against my chest. The fog thickened around them as if trying to hide what they belonged to. The glow pulsed once. Then they began to move, not closer, but sideways, circling. Slow, deliberate arcs through the haze, their light fading in and out like lanterns swaying in wind. We backed up, but the fog closed in. Every direction looked the same, pale, shapeless, endless. My breath echoed inside my mask, loud and uneven, and through it all, that faint whisper returned. Not words, just a hush, like something imitating speech. I could almost feel it brushing my ear. Even though no one was near me, the patrol leader raised his hand, a silent signal to stop. We froze. The whisper stopped too. For a few seconds, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. Even the fog seemed to pause. Then, footsteps. Not ours. Soft, dragging steps, approaching slowly from the fog ahead, each one deliberate, measured, like whoever was walking knew exactly where we stood. My pulse thudded against my throat. The others turned toward the sound, flashlights trembling. The fog shifted. A shadow stepped forward, human-shaped but not quite. The shoulders were wrong. Too narrow. The limbs. Too long. The eyes glowed faintly in its chest. Not where they should be. It leaned like it was curious. Then the fog swallowed it whole. The footsteps faded, but the whisper returned. Closer this time. A soft exhale beside my ear. Then another behind me, Malik shouted. I spun toward his voice, but he was gone. His light lay half buried in the sand, its beam caught in the fog like a frozen blade. No footprints led away. No sign of struggle, only the echo of his whisper still hanging in the air, a breath that didn't belong to anyone. We called his name once, twice, then stopped, because something answered. A voice. Quiet. Distant, mimicking his tone exactly. Here. That's all it said. Just that word. And then silence again. The glowing eyes began to fade one by one until there was only fog, no movement. No hum. Just that still, suffocating quiet. I knelt beside Malik's dropped light. The lens was cracked. Warm. When I touched the ground beneath it, it vibrated softly, like something breathing under the sand. We stayed until dawn, too afraid to move. The fog began to thin, melting into pale morning air. The dunes returned. The world seemed normal again, but the footprints, they were wrong. There were 3 sets leaving camp the night before. Only 2 came back, and when the wind shifted later that day, I thought I heard his whisper again. Just behind me. Close. Too close. Saying the same word. Here. Night had settled heavy across the dunes, the kind of dark that feels thick enough to touch. Every grain of sand looked frozen, but the air still moved. Slow, cold, like the desert was exhaling. We hadn't slept since Malik vanished. No one spoke his name anymore. It felt wrong to. The wind was restless tonight. It hissed through the rocks, carrying whispers that almost made sense. Almost. We camped near an old ridge, the ground uneven and dry. The sand there was darker, like it had soaked up something it shouldn't have. I sat with my back to a dune, watching the horizon pulse with faint heat lines. The moon was low, pale and sickly, turning everything silver. My breath came in short clouds. The air was colder than before, unnaturally so. I remember thinking, why does the desert feel like winter? That's when I felt it. A breath. Right against the back of my neck. It wasn't the wind. The air around me was still. This was closer, slower, warm. Every muscle in my spine went tight. I turned fast. Nothing. Just sand. And my own shaky breathing. I waited, listened, silence. But my heart wouldn't slow down. It felt like something was still there, just outside the circle of light. The others were sleeping, or pretending to. Their outlines were faint against the dim lamps. No one moved. Then the sand near my boots stirred. A small swirl, spiraling like a tiny storm. No wind touched it. It spun faster, lifting dust that shimmered in the pale light, as if something invisible was crouched there, breathing slow, steady. The hairs on my arms lifted. My mouth went dry. I blinked once. The swirl stopped. The sand settled as if nothing had moved at all, but the feeling didn't go away. That quiet weight pressing from somewhere close, it stayed, breathing with me. I scanned the dunes, eyes adjusting to the shifting shadows. They stretched longer than they should have, as if the moon had sunk lower without moving at all. And then I saw it, just at the edge of the ridge. Something crouched. It wasn't clear, just a shape, low to the ground like a person trying to hide, but not human in the way it moved. It tilted its head slowly, too smoothly, the way a thought turns before it's spoken. I blinked again, and it was gone. The ridge looked empty. Still. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Fatigue. Desert mirage. But I couldn't shake it. That feeling of being watched from just beneath the surface? Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt wrong here. The wind had stopped again. No rustling, no hum. Just that deep silence that makes your own pulse sound too loud. I tried to look away from the ridge, to breathe normal again, but the sand shifted once more. A faint ripple, like something crawling underneath. It moved in a circle, slow, deliberate, following the shape of our camp. The lamp flickered once, and for a split second I saw impressions forming in the sand. Hands, pressing up from below, not digging, just touching, as if the desert itself was reaching up to feel who we were. The lamp steadied. The marks vanished. I stood, feeling the cold pull of the air tighten around my throat. A whisper drifted across the camp. Low, fractured, my name, not shouted, not spoken, just breathed. It came from everywhere at once, from the dunes, from beneath the ground, from the hollow space behind me. I turned in a slow circle, trying to see it. Trying not to breathe too loud, but each time I looked somewhere, I felt it move to the other side. Always close, always watching. It was playing with me. I could feel its rhythm in my chest. Step, pause, breath. Step, pause, breath. It mimicked me perfectly. When I stopped, it stopped. When I took a slow breath, I felt it take one too, behind my ear. I don't know how long it went on like that. Minutes maybe, or longer, until the cold deepened, until my breath came out in long white trails that shouldn't exist in desert air. Then it leaned close again, closer than before. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. Right there, the weight of something unseen, its warmth brushing my skin. It exhaled softly, like it was curious how I would react. I didn't move. Couldn't. For a moment, I thought I heard it smile. Then the air thinned. The cold pulled back. The feeling was gone, only the whisper of sand shifting around my boots. I looked toward the ridge again. Nothing. But the dunes weren't the same. There was a hollow there now, a small depression in the sand, as if something had crouched for too long and finally stood up. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I blinked, I saw that shape again, waiting, silent, breathing, just out of sight. And sometimes, when the wind goes still, I can still feel it beside me, its breath, slow, careful, patient. The night had gone still again. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. We walked along the ridge, our boots sinking into soft sand that glowed faintly under the thin moonlight. The desert stretched forever, an ocean of pale dunes and broken rock, empty, but never silent. Every few steps, I thought I heard something shift, a quiet scrape, a low hum that faded before I could listen closer. Then I saw it. A light, faint, trembling on the horizon. At first I thought it was a campfire, maybe another patrol, maybe rescue, but it didn't stay still. It flickered once, twice, then jumped to the left, a distance too far for any flame to move. We stopped walking, watched. The light blinked again, then split into two, both hovering above the sand, pulsing out of rhythm with each other. It looked like someone waving lanterns in the dark. But there was no smoke, no warmth, no trail of movement, only that flicker, and the faint shimmer of air around it, like heat mirage, except the night was freezing cold. My breath fogged the inside of my mask. The air had turned metallic, sharp against my tongue. Then the shadows began to move, not ours, theirs. The rocks around us stretched long and thin, their shapes twisting against the pale ground. Each flicker from the horizon made them jump, one way then the other. I looked down. My shadow leaned forward even though the light was behind me. The others saw it too. One of them whispered, "Something's wrong with the ground." They were right. The sand wasn't flat anymore. It rippled gently like water under a faint breeze. Each pulse matched the flicker. Each shift in light seemed to bend the world slightly closer. The dunes no longer lined up with the sky. Their edges blurred. Their slopes bent inward, like the horizon itself was folding. The air grew heavier. My ears buzzed, a deep pressure settling behind them. The lights flashed again. 3 this time. And for a moment I thought I saw shapes moving between them. Tall silhouettes. Pausing, turning. When the light faded, the shapes didn't. They were standing on the sand now. Black outlines that didn't move with the wind. I blinked, and they were gone. But the sand where they stood still sank slightly, as if holding their weight. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating through my ribs. It wasn't sound exactly, and it was movement. A slow, pulsing rhythm that crawled up through my boots and spine. The others began stepping back, their lights shaking. One of them whispered my name, but it came out warped, like he was speaking underwater. I turned toward him and saw the desert behind him bend. The dunes dipped, then rose again, like something beneath the surface had shifted its back. The flickering light brightened, splitting into several points, spreading like veins through the horizon. The shadows twisted again, now stretching straight upward, defying every rule of light I knew. It was as if the desert itself was breathing in slow, uneven patterns, pulling us closer, holding us still. Each flicker sent a ripple through the air, and each ripple made the world less solid. The rocks blurred, the horizon thinned, and for a second I thought I could see through the sand, not into it, but past it. Something was beneath everything. A shape too large to understand, moving. I couldn't tell if it was far away or directly under my feet. Then the light blinked off. The world went silent again. No flicker. No hum. Only the faint rustle of sand settling. When I looked back to the horizon, there was nothing there. No glow, no shimmer. Just endless black. We didn't speak after that. We just turned and walked, each step slower than the last, each shadow bending the wrong way. And though the night was silent, the ground still pulsed faintly, as if remembering the rhythm of whatever had been moving beneath it. By dawn, the light had not returned, but the rocks were different, bent slightly outward, tilted, as if something enormous had shifted in the dark and the world hadn't quite returned to its place. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that flicker, far out on the horizon, like the desert is waiting to blink again. The night had thinned into gray. The stars were fading, their light swallowed by a pale haze stretching over the dunes. We moved slowly, following the same ridge we'd crossed before, our boots sinking softly into cold sand. No wind, no sound, just the faint crunch beneath us. It felt like walking across an empty sea. I kept my eyes low, counting each step, watching the way our footprints disappeared behind us under a thin drift of dust. The desert was quiet enough to hear breath echo inside the mask. A slow, rhythmic pulse. Then one of us stopped. He raised a hand and the rest froze. Behind us, in the place where the sand had just been smooth, there were prints. Fresh ones, not ours. Not from before. They were smaller, narrower, pressed deep, like something light had stepped there with impossible weight. We turned in silence. The footprints stretched backward into the haze, a perfect line, each one appearing to follow ours, half a step behind. The sand shifted faintly around them, as if something invisible had just lifted its foot. No wind, no falling dust, just those tracks and the low feeling that we were not alone. One of the men whispered, "Count them." I did. For every step we took, there was another, offset, trailing. We hadn't seen anyone for hours. No other patrols, no lights, just fog and the long breathing silence of the desert. But now, someone had been walking with us, or still was. I stepped closer to the prints, kneeling. They weren't deep enough for boots. Too clean, too round. They looked soft at the edges, as if the sand hadn't resisted at all. My hand hovered over one. The air above it was colder, dense. I could almost feel something hum there, like a faint current. Behind me, the others had begun to turn, their flashlights swaying across the dunes. Each beam faded quicker than it should have. as if the light was being swallowed. I could hear the smallest things now. Cloth brushing armor. The rasp of breath inside masks. Then, beneath it, something else. A whisper. It didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere, a soft, fragmented murmur, like a voice trying to form words but losing them to the fog. No wind carried it. No echo returned. It was inside the silence. I stood up fast, heart pushing against my throat. The tracks had grown longer. They reached further back now, too far for the time we'd stopped. I looked down at my own feet. The sand just behind my heel shifted once, then settled again, leaving another print. I hadn't moved. The others saw it too. One of them whispered, "Don't turn around!" His voice was trembling, and I understood why. The prints weren't following us anymore. They were circling, wide arcs forming slowly in the sand, cutting around our small group like something tracing a boundary. Each new step appeared in perfect rhythm, as if the desert itself was walking with us, but we couldn't hear it move. No crunch, no fall of dust. Only those whispers growing closer, almost brushing the edge of language. Something about the pattern felt wrong. The tracks weren't just circling, they were closing in, tighter, closer, step by step, until there was barely a few feet of untouched sand between us and them. The air changed then, heavier, still colder. Every breath hurt a little more. I could see the condensation inside my mask turn to frost, and just as suddenly as it started, the tracks stopped. The last set ended halfway toward us, pressed deep into the ground as if something had crouched there. The whispers went quiet. No movement. No pulse. Only the faint static hum that filled the emptiness where wind should have been. No one spoke. We began to move again, slowly, carefully. Our lights kept low. Every few steps I looked back. The prints were still there, unchanging, perfectly still. But sometimes I could swear one looked newer, sharper at the edges, like it had just been made. By dawn, the fog had thinned to white. We never saw anything, no shapes, no tracks ahead, only behind us, the endless line of footsteps that had followed all night. They never faded. Even when the wind returned, they stayed clear, and when I turned for the last time, I realized something that made my chest go still. There were 5 of us, but 6 sets of prints. The moon hung low over the desert, too low, too bright. Its light pooled across the sand like spilled milk, making every shadow too thin. Too long. We walked in silence. None of us spoke now. The air itself felt too fragile to break. The dunes glowed faintly, each grain reflecting that pale shimmer until it looked like we were walking through ash. Our boots sank softly. Each step left a hollow mark that filled with light instead of shadow. The wind had stopped hours ago. Even the air tasted still, like dust and iron. It must have been near midnight when I saw it. At first, I thought it was another drift of fog, a thin column of white, standing at the edge of the ridge. It didn't move, but it shimmered, as if heat were bending around it. Then I realized there was no heat, only cold. I blinked, and it was still there, a figure, pale, too pale. Not solid, not transparent either. It stood facing us. Or maybe not. Its shape didn't stay still long enough to be sure. One of the men whispered my name, too quiet, afraid it would hear. I couldn't answer. My throat felt full, like something heavy pressed against it from inside. The figure's outline rippled. Arms, or something like them, seemed to unfold, then draw back in again. It wasn't human, but it wanted to be. The moonlight bent toward it, like gravity had reversed. Everything around it darkened. Even the sand stopped glowing. We froze. The figure didn't move closer, didn't breathe, didn't fade, it just waited. The silence grew thicker, almost soft, like wool pressed against the ears. I couldn't hear the others anymore. No breath. No shuffling. Just a low vibration that started somewhere deep beneath my feet. A hum, quiet, but so deep it made my teeth ache. It wasn't coming from the figure. It was coming from everything else. The dunes, the rocks, even the air. The figure flickered once, like a skipped frame. And then it was gone. Just gone. No wind, no trace. Only the pale imprint of light where it had stood. We stayed still for a long time. No one wanted to speak first. Then slowly I felt warmth return to the air. A small movement of wind brushing past my neck, but it carried something with it. A sound. Not quite a voice. Not quite a song. A low, mournful hum that felt more inside the body than outside it. It moved between us like a current, soft, deliberate, circling. One of the men called out, a single word I couldn't make out. The hum grew louder for a moment, like it was answering, then quiet again. We turned our lights toward the ridge. Nothing. Only ripples in the sand that looked like something had stood there for a very long time. I started to walk forward, slowly, each breath shallow. The air ahead shimmered faintly, and the hum returned, thin now, almost kind. It followed the pulse of my steps. Inhale, exhale, a rhythm, and for a brief moment, I thought I could see it again. Not fully. Just the outline, like frost hanging in the air, still there, watching. The wind picked up suddenly, raking across the dunes, pulling the sand into spirals. When it passed, the light of the moon had shifted, too quickly, as if hours had jumped by in seconds. The others were already backing away, faces pale in the glow. No one said a word. We left the ridge, the hum fading behind us until it became part of the silence again. But it never really went away. Even now, when the desert is quiet and the night turns silver, I hear it. That slow, hollow resonance that moves beneath the earth, waiting to rise again. And sometimes, when the wind stops just right, I catch a glimpse of that pale shimmer at the horizon. Not light. Not shadow, just a shape too still to be alive, too familiar to be gone. The desert felt wrong that night, still, too still. No wind, no breath. Just the faint ticking of our boots against the grains. The stars hung heavy, a million cold eyes staring down, reflected in the shifting dunes. The sand looked alive under that light. Soft waves of silver and shadow, and somewhere between them, something began to take shape. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. A ripple caused by exhaustion, maybe. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became. Faces, faint, uneven, etched by the shadows between the dunes, mouths half open, eyes carved from hollows where the wind once moved. They weren't moving, but they weren't still either. Each gust, each breath of air that brushed across the sand, seemed to change them. Their features deepened, shifted, as though listening. Someone behind me muttered something under their breath. A prayer, or maybe just a name. We all stopped walking. The silence pressed closer, like the desert itself was holding its breath. I turned my light away from the faces. But when I looked back, they were different. The eyes were open wider now, round, alert. They caught the starlight, and for a brief second they gleamed, not reflections. Something else, something that watched back. A chill moved through me. It wasn't the wind. It was like being seen. Deeply, completely. My throat tightened. My skin prickled, as if invisible grains of sand were crawling beneath it. One of the dunes shifted, only slightly, but enough that its face, its expression, seemed to change. A mouth curled, not into a smile, something older, something empty. The stars pulsed overhead, and for a heartbeat, every dune around us looked alive, hundreds of them, each one shaped like something that used to be human, their outlines bent and stretched, noses, lips, cheeks, formed and unformed again like wet clay. I blinked hard, but when I did, they moved again. Not the dunes. The eyes. They followed. Every step we took, they turned, grain by grain, to keep us in their gaze. The air grew thick. It hummed faintly, a low vibration you could feel in your ribs. The patrol spread out a little, as if distance could change what we saw. But it didn't matter. Wherever I looked, faces waited. Some small and far away, some so close I could see the faint shimmer of heat above them, and beneath that shimmer, the suggestion of movement, like something breathing under the sand. My lips felt dry. When I tried to swallow, the air scraped down like dust. The faces began to blend, melting into one another, until it felt like the whole landscape was watching. I couldn't tell anymore if they were part of the dunes, or if the dunes were part of them. It was hard to breathe. The horizon wavered, and the stars seemed to sink lower, as if the sky itself were bending closer to look. Then, a whisper, soft, too soft to understand. But it came from everywhere at once. The wind had returned, except it didn't move the sand. It shaped it. More faces. More eyes, all turning toward us. The hum deepened. It wasn't just in the air now. It was in the ground. In our boots. In our bones. I felt my heart beating out of rhythm, matching that low vibration. One of the dunes ahead cracked slightly, sand spilling down its face like tears, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something inside. A glimpse. Pale. Still. Then it was gone. The dunes smoothed themselves out. The faces vanished, all at once. The desert fell silent again. We stood there, not speaking, not even breathing. The stars blinked, and the world returned to what it was, an endless stretch of sand and shadow. But as we turned to leave, I looked back only once, and in the faint starlight, I saw one last face rise slowly from the sand, eyes half closed, mouth open in a quiet sigh. It wasn't shaped by the wind this time, it was shaped by something else, and it was wearing my expression. The wind had gone quiet by dusk. Even the sand stopped moving. We walked in silence, our boots leaving shallow prints in the cooling dust. The moon rose pale and slow, its light spilling across the dunes like milk over glass. That's when the dune ahead of us shivered. A ripple, soft, like it was breathing. Then it fell. The whole slope slid down in one slow collapse, grains spilling in waves that shimmered in the moonlight. When the dust cleared, there was a hollow space in its center, a dark mouth, wide, silent. At first, it looked shallow, just another pit carved by wind and time. But when I leaned closer, the air changed. It was cooler, heavier, and from deep within, something whispered. It wasn't wind. It wasn't echo. It was speech, soft, layered, like many voices murmuring the same word over and over too quietly to understand. The others stayed back. Their lights trembled against the slope, catching the edges of broken sand. I took one small step forward. The ground crunched beneath my heel. Grains trickled into the hollow, falling endlessly, never hitting bottom. The whispering deepened. It wasn't calling me exactly, but it wasn't pushing me away either. It waited. The light from my hand lamp reached only a few feet inside. Beyond that, just black. And in that blackness, something moved. A slow shift. Like a shadow changing its weight. Like the sand itself was rearranging to breathe. I froze. The whispers stopped. All at once, the silence became unbearable. My breath felt too loud, too human. I crouched near the edge, close enough to smell the air coming from inside. It was cold. But wrong. There was a faint sweetness, like rust mixed with dust, like something that used to be alive. When I looked again, the tunnel seemed deeper, longer, almost inviting. The slope around it curved downward, as though the dune itself had folded open, exposing a secret it had hidden for centuries. Something glinted within, just a faint shimmer, as if the darkness had eyes reflecting the light back at me. I told myself it was stone. Mineral reflection. Nothing more, but then it blinked. The glint vanished, returned lower, nearer. My fingers twitched on the flashlight. I should have stepped back. But I didn't. It felt like something was waiting just beyond reach. Not dangerous, not yet. Just aware. Every part of me leaned forward without meaning to. The air pulled at me, a quiet suction drawing my breath toward the hollow. Behind me, someone whispered my name. Or maybe it came from inside. I couldn't tell anymore. The sand around my boots began to shift. Tiny tremors, circular, like something was stirring beneath it. I backed away slowly, but the whispering started again. Not words now, just a rhythm, soft and steady, like something trying to match my heartbeat. My lamp flickered once, twice, and for a moment, I saw deeper inside. The tunnel wasn't empty. The walls were lined with something pale, curved, fragile, stacked like shells, not stone, not bone, something in between. They caught the light and glowed faintly, like veins beneath thin skin. Then darkness swallowed them again. I felt a pressure behind my eyes. A thought that wasn't mine. Come closer. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't sound. It was inside. I turned off the light, instant black. Only the faint hum remained. The earth breathing through its open wound. The whispering stopped again, and in the quiet I thought I heard it move closer. A scrape. A low inhale, almost curious. The sand near the edge began to rise again, slowly rebuilding itself. The hollow narrowing, closing. I stumbled back as the last of the dark disappeared, sealed beneath the shifting grains. The dune reformed in silence, smooth and perfect, as if it had never opened at all. Only the faint, rhythmic pulse of air remained, a heartbeat, muffled beneath the sand. I stood there long after the others moved on, listening, and though the desert lay still under the pale moon, I could feel it. The hollow wasn't gone, just hidden, waiting for another collapse, for another breath, for someone curious enough to lean too close. Night stretched thin across the desert, cold enough to make the air sting, quiet enough to hear your own pulse. We stopped near the ridge, a small break to check our gear, to breathe, to feel human again. The radio crackled once. A faint hiss like a whisper through cloth, then it went quiet. No wind, no voices, just that low hum that lives inside silence. I thought the batteries were dying. But then, the static came back. It was soft at first, a pulse, uneven. Then clearer, not random, rhythmic. Someone, or something, trying to speak. The others ignored it. They were too tired to care. But I kept listening. The static wasn't just noise anymore. It moved like breath, like something alive inside the machine. I turned the dial slowly, each click cutting through the air, and then a flash. The small screen flickered. For less than a heartbeat, a face appeared, distorted, pale, eyes stretched too wide, mouth opening without sound, then gone. Just static again. I froze, staring at the blank screen. The glow from the radio lit the sand around me, casting long, uneven shadows. They looked like figures. Watching, I blinked hard. The shapes didn't move. Another flash. This time slower, not a face, a figure, standing in what looked like fog. Arms bent wrong, body trembling as though underwater, the image twisted, breaking into lines of static, then fading. The radio hissed, then whispered something low, too faint to understand, like a language spoken between breaths. I wanted to shut it off, but I couldn't. Each burst of static felt like a heartbeat, a pattern, calling something forward, another image. Closer now, not a stranger. It looked like one of us, same uniform, same insignia on the sleeve. But the face was blurred, as if it was being erased in real time. The mouth moved. No sound, just that hum. That unbearable hum beneath the noise. I reached out and touched the metal casing. It was cold, too cold. The kind of cold that burns through gloves. The screen flashed again, and this time, it stayed. A group of figures standing together, all facing the same direction. Their outlines flickered like candlelight. The desert behind them looked identical to ours. The same horizon, the same stars. For a moment, I thought the radio was showing us, but one of them turned its head, and it didn't have a face, just a hollow space where the eyes and mouth should have been. I stumbled backward, kicking up sand. The others turned toward me, but before they could speak, the static rose again, louder, deeper, almost angry. It pulsed through the night, like a heartbeat buried in the air. Then, just for a second, the voice came through low, wet, impossible. It said my name. Every hair on my arms lifted. The radio went dead. We stood there, no one breathing, as the desert seemed to stretch wider around us. When I tried turning it back on, the display was gone, blank glass reflecting the moon. But something faint lingered behind the reflection. A flicker, like movement trapped inside. I tilted it slightly, and there it was again. A flash of static, and behind it, the outline of a face. Not distorted this time. Still. Waiting. I dropped it. It hit the sand without sound. The static didn't stop. It came from the air now, thin, electric, hissing through the night like breath through teeth. Every few seconds, the pattern changed. A burst, a pause, a long stretch of silence, like it was learning how to speak through us. The others whispered among themselves, but their voices sounded distant, flattened, like radio noise played backward. For a moment, I couldn't tell if they were real. The light around us dimmed. Though the moon hadn't moved, the sand began to hum beneath my boots. Tiny grains vibrating as if something below was listening too. I shut my eyes. The static pulsed once more, and in that pulse I saw the faces again, not through the radio, but in my mind, 1,000 pale faces, all flickering at the edges. Watching from behind some unseen veil, the hum softened. The air stilled. When I opened my eyes, the radio was silent again. Nothing moved. The desert looked normal. But the static hadn't gone away. It had only shifted, deeper now. Inside the quiet. Every breath I take since that night, there's a faint hiss between the inhale and the exhale, a thread of noise that doesn't belong to me. Sometimes I think it's just memory, a trick of fear. Other times, I think the radio never turned off. It just moved into us. The desert was colder that night, the kind of cold that wraps itself around your lungs, slows every breath, makes you listen harder. We had stopped to rest. Lanterns flickered softly against the dunes, casting orange light across the tents. The sand glittered faintly, each grain sharp as glass. It should have felt safe, still, predictable. But something was wrong with the light. At first, I thought the flame was dying, a weak lantern stuttering against the wind. But the wind wasn't moving, and the shadows, they were. One leaned too far away, stretched across the ground like ink spilled over fabric. Another twitched at the edge of the tent, moving when no one did. I blinked, rubbed at my eyes. Still there. The shadows danced, but not to the rhythm of the lanterns. They pulsed on their own, slow, deliberate, as if they were breathing. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was exhaustion. Too many nights without sleep. But the longer I watched, the clearer it became. They weren't reflections. They weren't ours. Something else was standing in our light. The sand shifted near the edge of camp, a faint rustle that shouldn't have been there. The others were asleep, faces turned away from the glow. Only I was awake to see it. A shadow uncoiled itself from the tent wall, tall, thin, like smoke given weight. It stretched out along the ground, then folded back on itself, like it was thinking. I held my breath. The air inside the tent felt tight, thick with the scent of dust and metal. Then came the whisper, faint, soft, like someone speaking just behind me. I turned. Nothing. Only the pale shimmer of moonlight on canvas and sand. Another whisper. This time from the other side. Too fast to catch the words, but I could feel them brushing my ear. They came again from every direction. A murmur, layered and low, like the wind trying to form sentences. The shadows began to move again, slowly, They stretched toward me, crawling across the floor of the tent with an awful patience. I stumbled back, my boots scraping against the sand. The lantern flickered harder, as if it could sense something wrong. The nearest shadow stopped inches from my foot. Its edge rippled as though it wanted to rise. A thin hum filled the air, vibrating against my chest. I could feel it, not hear it. A pulse that matched my heartbeat. The whispers grew clearer. Voices now, but not human, each one layered over the next, speaking in broken rhythm. Some sounded like my name, others like laughter. I froze, afraid that if I moved, they'd notice me more. But they already had. The shadow nearest the tent wall elongated again, crawling upward, stretching past where light should have ended. Its form broke into dozens of smaller strands, like smoke dividing. They slid across the ceiling, curling and weaving, tracing the outline of faces that weren't there. I could feel them watching. The temperature dropped suddenly, enough to make the lantern sputter. For a moment, everything flickered. Light and dark switching places too fast to follow. And in that flicker, I saw them. Dozens of figures standing just outside the tent. Featureless, perfectly still. Their shadows reached inside before they did. When the lantern steadied, the space was empty again, only the canvas walls swaying slightly, like the tent was breathing. The whispers didn't stop, though. They just quieted, pulled back into the edges, waiting. I sat there until dawn, watching the light shift, watching the shadows flatten again into something ordinary. But they weren't gone. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see the way they moved, as if they had their own rhythm, their own heartbeat. And sometimes when I walk at night, the light doesn't fall where it should. My shadow moves first, then I follow. The night had no wind. Even the sand seemed to rest, flat, unbroken, a pale sheet beneath the dim stars. We had stopped between two jagged ridges. Rocks rose from the ground like broken ribs, casting long shadows that looked too soft for stone. It was quiet enough to hear every breath, every shift of fabric, every thought. Then one of the rocks moved. A faint tremor ran through the ground, so slight I thought it was my pulse. But the dust lifted, slowly, deliberately, spiraling in the still air. I crouched closer, fingers brushing the cold surface. It was vibrating, like something alive beneath it. Another rock shuddered, then another. Within seconds, the ridge around us seemed to breathe. Each stone expanding, contracting in quiet rhythm. I felt it in my chest, in the soles of my boots. A slow, heavy pulse. We didn't speak. No one dared to. The silence was too fragile. Then the dust began to rise again, a thin veil climbing up from the trembling earth. At first it drifted aimlessly, but then it gathered. Shapes formed inside it, rough outlines of people, shoulders, heads tilted upward, faces without features. They stood where the rocks were, as if the stones had exhaled them. I took a step back. The air felt thick, like breathing through cloth. The shapes didn't move. They only swayed slowly in perfect time with the trembling ground. Someone whispered behind me, barely a sound, asking if we were dreaming. No one answered, because there was no waking up from this. We were already too deep in it. The dust figures began to lose their shape, melting back into the air. But the rocks, they still breathed. One near my foot lifted, as if pushed from below. I stumbled back, watching as it rolled slightly, then settled again, like a creature sighing in its sleep. It felt wrong to move, like we were being watched by something too vast to understand. The desert stretched endless around us, but for the first time it didn't feel empty. It felt aware. The tremors grew softer, the air stilling once more. The dust sank. The shapes faded, but that stillness, that calm, was worse than the movement. Every breath I took sounded too loud. Too human. Someone muttered that maybe the desert was alive. Maybe it had always been. And maybe we had just felt it breathing for the first time. The idea sank deep into me. The sand beneath our feet and the miles of shifting dunes were not lifeless. They were skin. a living surface stretching beyond sight, and we were walking on its back. The silence deepened. Even the stars seemed to dim, like they were hiding their light. We packed our things in silence. No one looked down too long. No one wanted to see if the ground was still moving. When I finally turned away, I caught one last glimpse of the ridge. The rocks had stilled. But in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw one of the dust shapes still standing there, head tilted, watching us leave. I blinked, and it was gone. Only pale sand remained, but the ground under me still felt warm, as if something enormous was breathing just beneath the surface. And as I walked, I realized the rhythm of that breath matched mine. The desert was supposed to be still, but tonight, it breathed like something alive. We'd followed the same trail for hours, our boots pressing into the same grooves carved by countless patrols before us. The sand felt familiar, predictable. Then it wasn't. The prints ahead ended mid-step, no scuff marks, no turn, just nothing. As if the earth had swallowed the rest of the path whole. I blinked at the horizon, trying to trace where it bent, where the ridges might connect again. But a wall of fog rolled in, slow, heavy, curling through the dunes like breath from something vast and sleeping. It wrapped around us before anyone spoke. The air grew cold, wet against my skin, thick with the scent of metal and dust. Our tracks behind us began to fade. One by one, each footprint, softening, smoothing out. Until even our starting point was gone, we stood in a circle of gray. No sky, no stars, just the soft rustle of fabric and the sound of our own breathing. Slow, uneasy. Someone muttered that the compass was spinning. He wasn't wrong. The needle twitched back and forth as if it couldn't decide what direction was real anymore. I took a step forward. The sand shifted beneath me, but the horizon didn't move. It was as though we were walking in place. Every shape around us, every ridge, every stone, blurred, rearranged itself when we blinked. Landmarks turned unfamiliar. The desert we had known for months was gone. Something about the silence changed. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was thick, a silence that pressed against the ears, like it wanted to drown out even our thoughts. I could feel it. The weight of being seen without knowing by what. A soft hum began to rise through the air, low and distant. It pulsed through the fog like an echo of a place we couldn't reach. The others whispered to one another, voices trembling, but every word came back warped, as if repeated from behind the mist, spoken a moment too late. I turned in circles. The fog looked the same in every direction, white, endless, alive. I tried to mark our position, a line in the sand, a small cairn of stones, but when I looked away, it was gone. The ground beneath us seemed to shift, softening with every step. Sometimes it felt solid, sometimes hollow, like we were walking across something that didn't want to hold us. One of the men whispered, "Maybe we're walking in circles." He was right, but not in the way he thought. We weren't looping around the same space. The space itself was looping around us. The fog pressed closer, tightening like a hand. My breath came slower, shallower. The air felt wrong, like it wasn't meant for lungs. And then the hum stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. It made my skin crawl. Like the world was holding its breath, waiting for us to understand something we couldn't see. The sand underfoot shifted again. A faint tremor, like something beneath us turning over. I caught movement at the edge of the fog. A faint shimmer, a suggestion of light. It looked like our camp lanterns, but distorted as if seen through rippling water. We followed it. Desperation outweighed reason. Each step grew heavier. The fog thickened, turning the world into shades of white and gray. The light ahead flickered. Always close, never reachable. When it finally faded, we realized the ground had changed. No dunes. No familiar slopes. Just smooth, untouched sand stretching in all directions. We had lost everything. The trail, the landmarks, the sky itself. The desert was gone. Or maybe It was still here, but it had decided to hide from us. I knelt, pressed my hand into the sand. It felt warm, almost like skin, and beneath that warmth, something pulsed. Slow, steady, alive. No one spoke again. We stood there in the pale fog, surrounded by nothing, and I thought, maybe the desert hadn't changed. Maybe it was showing us what it truly was when no one was meant to see. A place without direction, without time, without escape. We had vanished from the path, and maybe the path had vanished from us. The desert had turned white by nightfall, not from frost, not from moonlight, but from the wind. It moved differently that evening, not like a current, but like a presence that had learned how to breathe. Each gust felt thin, hollow, as though it passed through things that weren't supposed to exist. I pulled my scarf tighter. The air stung like static against my skin. Grains of sand clung to my lashes, fine and sharp as glass. The others walked ahead in silence. Our boots sank into the dunes, but the prints vanished almost instantly, erased by the same wind that carried. Voices. At first I thought it was just the shifting sand, a trick of the air, but it grew clearer. Whispers. They threaded through the gusts, soft and deliberate, like someone speaking behind cupped hands. I stopped. Turned slowly. Nothing. Just pale dunes rolling under a low sky, but the wind didn't stop. It pressed against my ears, curling around my head, murmuring things too faint to understand. Then came the laughter. Faint, almost gentle, but wrong, as if it came from more than one direction at once. It fluttered through the night air like a broken echo circling us. The others heard it too. I could tell by the way they froze, heads turning slowly, eyes scanning the empty horizon. No one spoke. There was no point. You can't talk to the wind. A figure darted across the nearest dune. Then another. Quick, shapeless, faster than anything human should move. I blinked. They were gone. Only the sand stirred, shifting in small, deliberate waves as though something had brushed across it. We stood motionless, listening. The laughter returned. Closer this time, but thinner, like it came from something without lungs. The air trembled around us. Each gust seemed to have a rhythm, a pattern of breath. Inhale, exhale, pause. Then again. It wasn't the desert moving anymore. It was the desert breathing. My chest tightened. Each inhale I took felt stolen, as if the air belonged to something else. We tried to keep walking. The light from our lanterns flickered, pale and fragile, barely reaching beyond a few steps. Shapes began appearing at the edge of it, not solid, not even shadows, but distortions in the air. Like the dunes themselves were trying to take form. I thought I saw faces, mouths open, eyes wide, but they blurred whenever I looked straight at them, like the wind didn't want to be seen clearly. Someone behind me whispered, "It's watching us." He was right. I could feel it. The gaze. Every shift of air carried weight, as if invisible eyes were moving just beyond sight. The pale wind brushed against my neck, soft at first, then colder, sharp enough to sting. It lingered there, like breath. I turned again, slowly, afraid of what I might see. The dunes were still, utterly still, and then movement. A shape, tall and narrow, rising from the sand itself. It stretched upward, wavering, as if the desert were trying to imitate a human form. Then it broke apart, dissolving into dust that spiraled upward and vanished. The wind howled once, a single low moan that faded into quiet. Then silence. Real silence, the kind that pressed against the chest until it hurt. We stood there, unsure if we should move, afraid that motion might draw attention again. The desert was vast, empty, but I could swear something was still there, moving just beyond hearing, tracking the rhythm of our breathing. I could almost feel it learning, matching, mimicking. When the next gust came, it brushed past my ear and I heard it, a faint voice, so close it felt like my own whisper turned back at me. It said nothing clear, just a breath. A sound too quiet to exist, but it was enough to know. The desert was listening. The wind wasn't empty, and when it moved through us, it didn't pass by. It passed through, taking something small with it each time, until only the pale air remained, and we were just part of its whisper. The desert was quiet that night, too quiet. Even the wind had stopped moving, as if the dunes themselves were holding their breath. Our lanterns glowed weakly, casting a trembling circle of light around us. The sand shimmered faintly, cold, metallic, like it had forgotten how to be warm. That's when I saw them. 2 points of light, far in the distance, pale yellow-white, hovering just above the ground. At first I thought they were stars, but they didn't flicker. They watched. We stood still for a long time. No one spoke. Even our radios stayed silent, their static gone, swallowed by the dry air. The eyes didn't move. Not closer, not away. They only waited. Every few minutes, someone turned to check if they were still there. And they always were. Unblinking. Patient. I told myself it was an illusion. A reflection, maybe, from the lantern glass. But then the wind returned. Soft. Crawling through the dunes like a whisper through teeth. And the eyes moved. Just slightly. Enough to know they were real. They slid to the left. Not walking. Not swaying. Just gliding like something watching us from behind a sheet of glass. My breath came shallow. Every exhale felt loud. We turned our lamps toward them, but the beams died halfway, as if the air refused to carry light that far. Still, I felt the weight of that gaze, pressing into my chest, tracking every movement. Someone muttered behind me, said we should go. Another said we should stay. It didn't matter. The desert had stopped listening to us hours ago. When we finally began walking again, the eyes followed. No footsteps, no sound. Just the same slow drift, matching our pace, keeping the same impossible distance. Every time I looked back, they were there. And sometimes, for half a second, I saw more than just light. An outline, a shadow around the glow. Something tall, thin, barely formed, like a figure drawn in smoke, but when I blinked, it was gone. We tried to outsmart it, split directions, circle back, but no matter how we moved, the eyes returned to the same spot on the horizon, always in front of us now. Always watching, the air grew heavier, like breathing through damp cloth. The sand began to hum, a faint vibration beneath our boots. The dunes seemed to lean closer, shapes forming in their slopes, faces that dissolved when looked at directly. I could feel something bending. Not the air, not the ground. Reality itself. Each step forward felt wrong. Like the distance was folding inward, bringing the watcher closer, even when it didn't move. Then one of the lanterns flickered out, and the darkness changed. It wasn't black anymore. It had depth, layers, movement. I saw the eyes again, clearer this time, close enough to see their reflection in the sand. They weren't glowing, they were reflecting, but nothing was shining on them. They blinked once, slow, deliberate. That single motion broke something inside me. The air rushed back in a wave, sand spiraling up like smoke, and the eyes vanished. But I could still feel them, behind my eyelids, in every shadow the lanterns cast. We stood there in silence, no one sure if it was over, or if it had just moved somewhere else. The wind shifted again, colder now, as if it had passed through something alive. I caught my reflection in the glass of the lantern. For a moment, I thought I saw them there too. The same faint glow buried deep behind my own eyes. I looked away. No one spoke the rest of the night. None of us wanted to admit it, but I think we all felt the same thing. That whatever had been watching us was no longer out there. It was closer. Somewhere between breath and thought, just waiting for us to look back. The desert was still. Only the crunch of our boots broke the silence. Each step was soft, deliberate, swallowed quickly by the sand. The night air hung heavy, unmoving, as if the world was waiting for something to begin. Then, we heard it. Another set of steps. They matched ours, perfectly, step for step, breath for breath, but there was no one there. I stopped walking. So did everyone else. The echoes didn't. They went on for 3 more beats, slow, measured, as if whatever followed us hadn't realized we'd stopped yet. Then silence, the kind that presses against your ears. That hums faintly beneath your skin. We exchanged glances. No one spoke. It wasn't fear, not yet. Just that thin, invisible thread of awareness that something had changed. We started walking again, slower this time, listening. The steps returned, always one stride behind, never rushing, never lagging. I tried to tell myself it was the wind. That sound travels strangely across open sand. But the rhythm, it was too exact, too human. The moon was low, its light spread thin and pale. Every shadow stretched long across the dunes, bending and twisting in quiet distortion. And then I saw it, our shadows, all 5 of them, sliding beside us like ink spilled across silk. But there were more, faint, almost transparent. Moving just behind the real ones, they followed the same motion, but not perfectly. One lifted its arm too high. Another turned its head too slow. Their movements were off, like reflections in unsteady water. I blinked hard, and for a moment they vanished. But when I looked again, they were closer. The others saw them too. I could tell by the way everyone walked, tense, shoulders tight, each step a little quicker than the last. The air grew colder. The sand, damp underfoot, it clung to my boots, as if it didn't want to let go. Every few seconds, the echoes would stop, then start again. Always when we weren't ready, one of the men whispered something. I couldn't catch it. His voice broke midway, as though the words refused to leave him fully. I turned my head to look behind us. Nothing. Just the dunes, rolling and endless. Each one shaped slightly differently than before, like they'd shifted while we weren't looking. And yet, the sound continued. Footsteps, soft, wet, breathing between each one, as if something unseen was learning how to mimic us. When the wind passed, I thought I heard faint laughter, or maybe it was just the air curling around the rocks. It didn't matter. Because in that moment I realized something. The echoes weren't following us. We were following them. Our steps were not the first. They were the answers to something walking just ahead, out of sight. Each footprint we made felt like it was being filled in, as if the sand already knew where we were going to step. I slowed down, lifted one foot, paused. A beat later, the sound came again. My own step, repeated back to me a second too late. That delay, it made my stomach twist. We reached a ridge. Below, the moonlight spilled across the valley floor. Our shadows stretched down the slope, long, thin, trembling, and at the bottom, they split. Each one broke apart, pulling away from the body it belonged to. Standing separate. Still moving, I froze. The others did too. No one spoke. No one breathed. The shapes moved on their own now, jerking forward in stilted patterns, walking the path we hadn't yet taken. They stopped at the edge of the next dune, turning in unison to face us. 5 shadows. Staring up, waiting, my mouth was dry, the air thick with static. For a second I thought I could see faces forming within them, blurred, hollow imprints of our own. The sand trembled. The echoes stopped. Everything went quiet again. Only our breathing remained, uneven, fragile. I wanted to turn around, to run. But the desert behind us looked wrong. The dunes rearranged, the horizon folding in on itself. So we stayed there, frozen, watching our shadows watch us, until the moon slipped behind the clouds, and they dissolved, melting back into the darkness, like they'd never been real at all. But even now, when I walk alone, I still listen. Sometimes, if I stop suddenly, I hear it again. That one extra step trailing behind my own, waiting for me to move first. The night was windless. No movement. No song of insects. Just the weight of heat pressed into the sand, still clinging from the day before. We walked in single file. Our lights dim, our voices gone. Even our footsteps felt quieter now, like the ground didn't want to be disturbed. The dunes around us shifted in faint layers, pale ridges that rose and fell like sleeping things. Every few steps the horizon blurred, as if it was breathing. Then I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't wind. It came from beneath, low, broken, too soft to understand. I froze, listening. The others kept walking, their shapes flickering in the haze ahead. When I bent down, the sound grew clearer, a murmur like voices speaking through sand. But there was no pattern. No language, just rhythm, like something was imitating conversation without knowing what words meant. I pressed my palm to the ground. It was warm, pulsing faintly, as if something moved deep below. A breath brushed past my ear, dry and brittle, like paper tearing. I turned sharply. Nothing, just the dunes. Still, I caught up with the patrol, but the whisper followed, sometimes ahead of us, sometimes beside, never far. It rose and fell with the sand, as if the desert itself was speaking in its sleep. When the moon climbed higher, we saw shapes. At first they looked like mirages, ripples of heat, hints of movement at the edge of vision. But they didn't fade. They stood against the dunes, tall and uneven, as if made of the same sand that surrounded them. Their edges wavered in the moonlight, limbs that melted into dust, faces that vanished when looked at directly. Someone whispered, "Do you see them?" No one answered. No one needed to, because we all did. They were watching, patient, unmoving. Every few seconds, one would sink, slowly dissolving back into the ground like a breath exhaled too long. But new ones rose behind them. I felt something pull at the air around me, not wind, but weight. As though the night had eyes and it was deciding which one of us to keep. We kept walking. Our boots dragged through thick sand that felt heavier with every step. The whispers grew louder now, crowding the space between our thoughts. I could almost make out words. My name, maybe, or something shaped like it. The sound curled through my chest, thin as static. I wanted to speak back, but my throat was dry. Grain against grain, voice against dust. One of the men stumbled. He said he felt something beneath his feet, a hollow space. We all paused. The whisper fell silent. For a heartbeat, the desert held its breath. Then the sand shifted, a slow, rolling tremor, like something dragging itself just beneath the surface. We stepped back. The air trembled. And for a second I saw a hand, pale and grainy, reach up from the dune. It didn't grab. It only pressed outward, testing the surface, before melting away again. The whispers returned, faster this time, crowding over one another, hissing in broken rhythm. No language. Just intent. We moved without speaking, too afraid to run, too afraid to stop. The desert felt endless now. The sky hung low, crushing down against the ridges. Each step sank deeper than the last. Every few meters, I could see faint outlines emerging from the dunes beside us. Figures kneeling, their heads bowed, as though listening closely to the whispers beneath. None of them moved. Their faces were smooth, erased. But I could feel their gaze pressing against the side of my neck. We passed them one by one. The whispering never stopped. Sometimes it came from underfoot, sometimes from far away. Sometimes from within me it felt old, older than the sand, older than the stars above it. By dawn, the shapes were gone. The whispers faded with the light, sliding back beneath the dunes. The others said nothing, their faces pale, their eyes empty, like the desert had taken something from them. When I finally looked back, I saw our trail, a winding line of footprints that stretched out for miles, but just before the horizon they ended abruptly. No beginning. No path before ours. as if we had walked in circles, following something unseen that had been leading us all along. The air was still, the dunes silent once more. But if I listen closely, if I press my ear to the sand, I can still hear it. A whisper, soft, persistent, calling my name and waiting for me to answer. It was near dusk when we saw it. The light was thin, bleeding orange across the dunes, turning the sand into sheets of rust and ash. We were tired. Dust stung, moving without direction. Then one of the men stopped. He raised his hand and the whole patrol went still. At first I thought it was a trick of the heat, a dark ridge against a darker sky. But it wasn't. Something was crouched there, high above us, motionless. It didn't move when the wind shifted, didn't flinch when grains of sand rolled down its perch. Its shape was human. Almost. Arms too long. Head tilted too far to one side like it was studying us. No one spoke. No one breathed. The air grew heavier as if the desert itself was holding its breath. The ridge was maybe 50 meters away. But I could feel it, that quiet, steady weight of being watched. A single line of focus pressed against my chest. I lifted my binoculars. The lenses caught a flicker of movement, a shimmer of heat, and then it was clear. The figure was facing us. Its body was covered in something pale, a rough, cracked surface like dried clay. No color, no shine, and its eyes, they weren't glowing but somehow brighter than the rest of it, reflecting nothing, just depth. Empty and endless, someone whispered. Is it a person? No one answered. We started calling out quietly at first. A name we didn't know, a question we didn't mean. The figure didn't move. The desert swallowed our voices. Every word felt smaller, quieter, until only our breathing remained. I stepped forward. The sand sank under my boots, soft and trembling. The ridge stayed still. The figure, unblinking. A strange rhythm filled my chest. Heartbeat and silence. Heartbeat and stillness. Then it tilted its head. Slowly. Precisely. Not curious. Aware. The movement was deliberate. Too deliberate. Like it was mimicking the way we studied it. Someone behind me muttered a prayer. Another said it could be a trick of the light. But the light was dying, and the shape did not fade. It crouched lower, its limbs folding in a way that looked almost thoughtful. We aimed our flashlights one by one. Beams of white light cut across the ridge, flickering against sand and rock, but the figure absorbed it. Every ray, no shadow, no reflection. It was like the light avoided it, sliding off its form as if it wasn't truly there. When the wind came again, it carried a low hum. Not a voice, more like the vibration of something deep underground. It moved through my bones, through the metal of my gear, through the space behind my ribs, and then it turned away. No sound. No rush of sand. It just shifted its weight and the shape began to crawl along the ridge. Fast. Not running, not walking, just gliding. We followed its path with our lights, but it disappeared between the folds of the dunes. Gone. Only the wind remained, cold and thin, whispering across the surface of the desert like it was tracing where the figure had been. We waited there for a long time, watching the horizon, hoping it wouldn't come back. Hoping it would, because there was something in the way it moved, something that didn't belong to this place. Not animal, not spirit, older, patient. A kind of intelligence that didn't need words, that didn't need to chase. It only needed to be seen once. The feeling lingered as night fell. The stars came, sharp and cold, but none of us looked up. We knew it was still near, somewhere out in the dark, watching from another ridge, or perhaps just behind us, hidden in the folds of silence. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can feel it crouched there, that pale, still shape waiting in the distance. Not hunting. Not gone, just waiting for us to look up again. It started after sunset. The desert was still, a flat sea of cooling sand under a thin silver sky. Our camp lanterns burned low, their glow trembling in the faint wind. Every shadow seemed sharper than before, every line too clean, too deliberate. I thought it was a reflection at first, a trick from the metal on our packs. But then the light came again, a pale flicker rolling across the desert floor like lightning trapped beneath the sand. It wasn't bright, just soft enough to see, like moonlight, but alive. The others saw it too. Each pulse of light made the dunes twist, stretching shadows that didn't match the terrain. They bent in strange directions, some reaching toward us, others turning away. No one spoke for a long time. The light flickered again, closer this time. The air around us felt heavier, as if filled with invisible dust. I could taste metal on my tongue. Someone whispered, "Maybe it's a signal," but the pattern was wrong. It didn't flash in any rhythm we could name. It just drifted, like something breathing beneath the surface. When the next pulse came, the ground under my boots seemed to move, only slightly. A ripple in the sand, spreading out from where the light touched. We followed it. No one said to move. We just did. Step after step, the flicker would appear ahead, always just out of reach. It led us between dunes, down into narrow valleys where the wind couldn't reach. Each time it flashed, our shadows warped again, long then short, stretching sideways when they should have stretched behind us. I looked down once and saw my own shape move half a second late. The others didn't notice. Or they pretended not to. The deeper we went, the quieter the world became. Even the sand under our feet seemed muffled, like we were walking on something soft, something that could shift beneath us. Then another flash. This one didn't fade. It hovered low over the sand, pale and trembling, a sphere of light no larger than a lantern's flame. We stopped. The glow painted our faces in thin, unnatural color. No warmth, no sound. It pulsed once, and the dunes around us changed. The slope ahead, the one we'd been climbing, was gone. In its place, a hollow stretched outward, shaped like a path carved by unseen hands. The light drifted forward, slow, patient, as if it was waiting for us to follow. One of the men raised his arm to block it, and his shadow broke apart, splitting into several darker outlines that moved in different directions. He dropped his hand. The shadows rejoined, but none of them aligned with the light anymore. My throat tightened. The air was too cold, the sand too smooth. We turned to go back. But behind us, the path we'd come from was gone. Nothing but endless dunes, identical in every direction. I looked again at the hovering glow. It stayed perfectly still, almost kind, almost curious. A whisper drifted past my ear, too soft to understand. It could have been wind or breath. I stepped back. The light dimmed, then flared, sudden and sharp, throwing our shadows across the dunes again, but this time, they didn't mimic us. They were moving faster, jerking in fractured patterns, like they were trying to get ahead of us, to reach wherever the light was leading. The flicker pulsed once more, and all of the shadows collapsed inward, fusing into a single dark pool at the light's center. The glow rose higher, flickering wildly, spilling thin streaks of brightness across the desert, then stilled, and everything stopped. The air felt emptied. No wind, no movement. Even the stars seemed to fade. We stood there in the silence, watching as the last thread of light sank back into the sand, leaving no mark, no trace, only darkness. We waited for another flicker. It didn't come. Hours later, when we finally made it back to camp, the lanterns were still burning. But their light felt wrong, too steady, too shallow, as if it no longer touched what it should. And when I walked past the dunes the next morning, I saw footprints, ours, leading out into the open desert. But there was one more, set lighter, smaller, following, just behind, perfectly in sync, waiting for night to fall again. The air was cold that night, not the kind that stings, the kind that presses against your skin until you can't feel where the wind ends and your body begins. We'd stopped to rest, our boots half buried in soft dunes. The horizon was pale, washed in the color of bone. No moon, no movement. Just that feeling again, that something was awake beneath the sand. We spoke little now. Words felt too heavy, too loud. I remember glancing over at Malik. He was sitting near the edge of camp, his rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on nothing. I blinked, and he was gone. No sound, no shift in the sand, just absence, like the air had folded around him and closed. At first I thought he'd moved into the shadows. I stood up, looked across the ridge. Nothing, only the outline of our tracks trailing off into the dark. We called his name quietly. Then again louder. Nothing answered. Not even the wind. That silence. It wasn't natural. Even in the stillness of the desert, you can always hear something. A faint hum, a sigh of dust. But now, it was like the world had stopped breathing. We searched for his footprints. There were none. Just ours, ending where we stood. Someone whispered, "He didn't walk away." And I felt it too. Like the sand had taken him, swallowed him without a trace. The lantern flickered, its light bending oddly, casting long, trembling shadows across our faces. Every movement felt watched. The darkness around us didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, crowded with something that refused to be seen. I caught myself holding my breath, as if even air might draw attention. We stayed close after that, shoulders almost touching. No one sat. No one slept. The silence thickened until it hummed. I could feel it behind my eyes, inside my teeth, a vibration too low to name. And beneath that hum, a faint rhythm, like breathing. Not ours. It came from the dunes, slow, measured, alive. I stared out toward where Malik had been sitting. The sand there seemed softer, sunken slightly inward, as if something had just risen or just gone under. Every instinct told me to run. But where? The desert stretches endlessly. It knows no direction. It keeps what it takes. One of the men whispered a prayer. It broke something in the silence, and the air shifted. The lantern went out. In the darkness, I felt movement. Not wind. Something smoother, like fabric brushing past skin. I could hear breathing again. But not from beside me. From everywhere. Close, slow, patient. When the lantern finally caught a spark again, we were alone. Truly alone. There were fewer shadows now. One less shape among us. We didn't speak his name anymore. It felt dangerous to do so. Like calling it out might remind the desert it had missed something. Hours passed. The stars above us blurred, their light bent by the faint haze of sand. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I looked down at my boots. The sand beneath them shifted, just a little, like breath being drawn. The others noticed it too. No one moved. The dune beside us rose and fell slowly, as if something massive was sleeping beneath it. It wasn't until the air grew colder that I realized what felt wrong. The wind had stopped, completely, no movement, no sound, just the faint pulse of breath in the ground. Something exhaled. A soft release of air, dry, warm, too close. The lantern dimmed again. And I felt it, the weight of unseen eyes pressing into my skin, like hands that never touched. I turned once, thinking I saw a figure beyond the dunes. But it wasn't Malik. It was taller, still, watching. And as I blinked, it folded back into the sand, leaving the faintest ripple of dust in its place. We stood there until morning. No one spoke. No one slept. When the sun finally rose, its light felt thin, like it didn't want to be here either. We counted again. Still one short, no footprints, no trace. Just the same pale dunes, smooth as untouched water. The desert was quiet, completely still, as if it had finally exhaled its last breath.